Welcome to a new episode of Listen In with KNN, the sports sound of the district. Today, we welcome former college basketball standout and business entrepreneur, John Rogers. Rogers was the captain of the Ivy League co-champion Princeton University men's basketball team in the 1979-1980 season and played under legendary coach Pete Carril. 3 years after he graduated from Princeton, Rogers founded Ariel Capital Management, which today is known as Ariel Investments, a Chicago-based company that manages portfolios worth more than $10 billion. Rogers was noted in the book The World's 99 Greatest Investors in 2014. Rogers also has the distinction of being one of the very few who actually beat Michael Jordan, yes, Air Jordan himself, in a pickup game at MJ's very own basketball camp back in 2003. With that, we now welcome Mr. Rogers to this live stream of Listen In with KNN. Here's your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson. It's Listen In with KNN, the sports sound of the district. We bring you the biggest guests, great analysis, and the hottest sports stories in the nation's capital and beyond. And we bring it to you live. Welcome to this live stream broadcast of Listen In with KNN. Here's your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome into a brand new live stream edition of Listen In with KNN Sports Talk radio show and podcast presented right here on our home station, Fox Sports Radio, 96.9 FM and 1340 AM with me, your host, Kelsey Nicole Nelson. Now, a special thanks to all of you who joined us on Tuesday with special guest actress Nyreen Brown. Don't forget to check her out on Amazon Prime's Swarm. I promise you, you're going to get into it and you're going to love it. And we're going to keep the party going. I'm super excited today to be joined by John Rogers. He is the founder, chairman, and co-CEO of Ariel Investments. So without further ado, please help me welcome John Rogers to the show. He's a leader, a philanthropist, a pioneer, and most of all, he's an Ivy League champion. Super excited to get into conversation with John. Welcome, John.
Well, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. I'd like to do a wellness check first, John. How's everything going? I know you probably are super busy right now. I can only imagine.
It's been a busy time, and but things have been going well. And of course, it was a great year for Princeton basketball. So I was able to go to Louisville and see that Sweet 16 game.
Yeah.
Didn't quite end the way we wanted, but
I know. I was rooting for them, John. It was such a good story. They were representing the Ivy League, a Cinderella story. March Madness, a large conversation still happening this week. But, you know, for someone that went to Princeton, played basketball there, had to be just fun watching that team, you know, do what they did, really defying all the odds. And really, John, the men's tournament, I mean, what a tournament we had. It just seemed like, you know, the impossible and improbable, you know, could happen, especially when you look at a team like San Diego State University, who I'm sure no one, John, had in their final bracket, except maybe the students there. I mean, it was a fun tournament this year, right?
It really was fun. And we always have a lot of Princeton interns at Ariel. So Tosan Owoma, who is the star of our team and maybe hopefully a future NBA player, he spent the summer with us. So it's really cool to see him succeed this year.
That's awesome. Well, super exciting. And again, congrats to Princeton on a great run. Unfinished business, hopefully for next year to help propel that team. And honestly, as we saw this year, it's truly anyone's game. We saw that in both the men's and women's basketball tournament. And since we started off with basketball, John, let's dig into that more. So as I understand it, you were heavily influenced growing up in the Hyde Park community, and you actually love multiple sports, right? Beyond basketball, you actually also love baseball and bowling as well, right? So you're a multi-sport athlete. I love the bowling tie, and I love bowling too, but never got to the level that I wanted. So let's talk about growing up in Hyde Park and kind of where your love for sports started.
Well, it was a great place to grow up in Hyde Park. We were part of the University of Chicago community, and I was pretty athletic as a kid, and
yeah.
I went to the White Sox boys camp, and then a little later went to Dick Motta's basketball camp. He used to be the coach of the Chicago Bulls, and then he became the coach of the Washington professional team that won the world championship.
Yeah, so he's a popular name here.
Yeah.
But amazing. So you were an active kid, it sounded like, John, right? It sounds like you were always getting into different things, keeping yourself active and busy.
That's for sure. And I was an only child, and I guess just loved sports. And I actually got to spend 6 years as a vendor at Wrigley Field and White Sox Park and the old Chicago Stadium, selling everything, peanuts, popcorn, beer, and it was just an extraordinary experience.
A little bit of everything. And I'm sure that kept you in shape too. That's not an easy job, going up and down those steps during baseball.
That's true. I think that's a really good point. It did keep me in shape, and it gave you a lot of freedom too to play basketball in your off hours when you weren't working at the stadium.
Yeah. And what about the lessons that you learned though? When you first get that job and you're earning your own money, right? You don't have to ask the parents, what was that like for you? Finally getting kind of, like you said, that kind of freedom, right? To do as you please now with the money that you're earning.
Well, that was the great thing about being a vendor. You could come when you wanted to come, and if you couldn't come one day, that was fine. But the nice thing was that you got paid 20% of whatever you sold.
Ooh,
so
nice.
if you hustled, you could do really, really well back then for a young person. And I always would try to be one of the top 2 or 3 salesmen in whatever item I was selling that day. And if you did a good job, not only did you make more money, but then they would give you more important items to sell in the future. And, join the union, Local 236, Service Employees International. And it was just one of those experiences that was sort of transformative. It was a totally different life than Hyde Park in the University of Chicago community. There was a great diverse community there, but this was a completely different group at the ballpark.
Right. Like you said, that vast kind of difference. But like you said, being able to earn your own. And like you said, when you did well, you got to get better things, right? And so it probably motivated you to do more. And then you touched on, John, being an only child growing up. I want to talk on your family because I think you have such an incredible family history. Your father, right, was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. And I'll tell you, just historic, right? That had to be obviously super special for you. He flew over 100 missions during World War II. And then your mother was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School, right? So you're being born into this family, this historic family, like a first. And being an only child, did you feel like ever any pressure, John, to kind of live up to the expectations of your parents?
No, they were both terrific parents. They divorced when I was 3 years old. So I lived in both houses every week, my dad on the weekend and my mom during the week. And, they focused everything on me. All the attention was poured into me. They wanted to make sure I got the best education possible. And, it was just mom and dad. I really started to appreciate their pioneering efforts as I got older. Right. But as a young person, they were just mom and dad and coming to my games and supporting me with everything I did. And, I was just very, very lucky.
Yeah, it had to be special. Like you said, when you're younger, you don't know all those accolades, right? You just see them as mother and dad. They help you get what you need, and they help you to become, obviously the adult that you are now, just supporting you as a young child. And you talked about, that community that you grew up in Hyde Park. You talked about how diverse it was, both economically, racially, and religiously. So for you growing up in such a diverse community, what kind of lessons do you think were poured into you from an early age?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at an early age. I learned to respect people from all different walks of life. My mom thought that was important. And going to the University of Chicago High School, they sort of people really learned to respect people from all different points of view. And that was really important. Also, the University of Chicago Lab School put a lot of trust in you as a young person. So you learn to make your own decisions. And I think that's a reason there's been so many leaders that have come out of the University of Chicago Laboratory School. You know, during the Obama administration, you had Valerie Jarrett there, and you had Arnie Duncan in the cabinet. And, you know, those were all lab school leaders, and many, many others that were there in different parts of the administration. So it was a special place to grow up. And then having these pioneering parents where, you know, my mom made me understand that anything was possible if you worked really, really hard and, you know, didn't limit your ambitions. And then my dad always taught me that you always have to live up to the commitments you make to others. And, you know, so always tell the truth and, you know, treat others the way that you'd like to be treated. So having those strong values in that community was pretty special.
Yeah. And I think those are lessons that resonate today. And I think those are messages, John, that resonate today with so many of us, you know, here right now with, you know, just all of us, just treating each other with respect, right? Treating each other with the respect that we all want. I think that's how we can all advance as a community, especially with a lot of the conversations, you know, that have been happening this week, mostly largely based off the women's NCAA basketball tournament. That's what it comes down to. Folks just want to be treated with respect at the end of the day. And just going back to your childhood and growing up. So as I understand it, we talked about the different sports that you played, but eventually it was basketball, right? That you honed in on, that you wanted to focus on. You talked about Dick Motta and his basketball camp. And as you mentioned, he was the head coach of the Chicago Bulls at the time. But as I understand, he actually became a role model for you. Let's talk about that relationship that you were able to forge with him.
Well, that was back in the day, you know, whatever it was, you know, 45 years ago or so or more, where a NBA coach would go and spend 2-3 weeks at their camp.
So wonderful.
And got engaged and involved in the lives of the young people who came back year after year. So Coach Motta took an interest in me and told me that I could probably play in college, but made it clear that I didn't have a future as a professional player, which was important to learn at an early age. But also, though, you know, he taught you how, you know, the Bulls were always known for how hard they played. Norm Van Leer and Jerry Sloan and Bob Love and those guys, they played hard each and every possession. They competed. And so I learned to, you know, dive for loose balls, take charges, get through screens. And Coach Motta showed you how to do that and how important that was. The other thing that he did that was just, you know, I thought was just so essential was, you know, he was somebody that would stay in touch. And so when later on, as I was getting a little older, and, you know, I could go and see him in the locker room before a game, and he would take time with me. And I know that doesn't happen as much today in modern camps, but that having that kind of an interest from a professional coach, I think really prepared me for a chance to play for Princeton.
Yeah. And I think that you touched on so many things there. You know, I think when we think about the role of a coach in a young person's life, you know, there's so much more, right? Especially, and they're teaching so much more than basketball. You learn so many skills from it. You talked about it. Some of the things you learn in that basketball camp that obviously can also carry you outside the basketball court. And it's great to hear that special relationship that you had. You talked about some of these huge names too, that you had a chance to rub shoulders with, John. I mean, as a child, that had to be pretty inspirational for you, you know, to have that access. And I think that's so important for young kids to have these access, you know, to these people that they look up to, right? These people that they idolize, you know, and it makes you probably feel important, right, John?
Well, they did, you know, and at the camp, Norm Van Leer would be there at the camp every year. And eventually Jerry Sloan took over the camp after Coach Motta left, and I became a counselor there at the camp. And so you got to build these relationships with these icons. You're exactly right. And they were such role models because of the way they showed up and the way they played hard on each and every possession. They took everything seriously. So those early role models made a big difference in my life, and I really treasure that.
Yeah. And then also just the real conversation you mentioned, you know, telling you could probably be a good ball player in college, but maybe not the pros. And, you know, I think sometimes, John, those conversations could be difficult to have, you know, with young people. You know, a lot of times people, you know, want to tell people what they want to hear. But as you said, you can, you know, learn a real lesson, you know, from that. And I think there is something that you can importantly take from that. Because, you know, in our minds, you know, all of us want to probably be athletes at one point in our life. You know, some of us maybe didn't have the height for it or didn't have the skill talent for it. But, you know, everyone tells you to, you know, to be what you want to be and and believe, but I also think there's something special in that realness, right? When somebody kind of just gives you the real deal, sits you down. So I think you can also have a plan B, plan C for what you want to do in life.
I can still remember where I was when Coach Mata took me aside and told me, the truth. But it's interesting, when I was playing at Princeton, freshmen couldn't play varsity yet.
Right.
And so I was on the freshman team, and the freshman coach, Tony Relva, said, we're going to tell you the truth for the first time in your life. Your parents have always told you how terrific you are, and often your teachers at your school have told you how terrific. First time in your life, we're here to tell you the absolute truth of what you're good at and where you're weak at. And that was something that was a unique part of the culture of Princeton basketball.
And that's huge. That's huge, again, because like you said, a lot of times we're filled with things that people think we want to hear. And your parents are supposed to do that, right? Every child is the greatest to their parent, as they should be. But sometimes, when someone gives you that real deal, you're like, oh, snap. Like, okay, this isn't really how it is. And it's kind of like that eye-opening, moment. And then, we're talking about you playing at Princeton, but I want to talk about the journey, from you, playing, in Chicago, playing in Hyde Park, to your journey, to Princeton. What was that like for you? Because Princeton's a huge school, right? It takes you out probably your comfort zone of where you're comfortable, your hometown area, obviously an Ivy League school. So, was there any apprehension before committing to Princeton, John? Or was it like that was the place you always wanted to go? This was the dream and you were going to make it happen somehow, somewhat?
I wasn't a big time recruit by any means. And, I had good success basketball-wise in Chicago. I'd been there's two classes of players then, Class A and AA leagues. And I was a, Class A all-state, player and all area in Chicago. And, I'd done really, really well in high school and probably thought I was a better player than I really was.
Right.
When I went on my recruiting visits, I remember going to Penn and meeting Chuck Daly, and Chuck was the coach there, and he made it clear he had not that much interest in me. And that team, coach, the team that he had helped put together, Penn went to the Final Four when I was a junior. So there was a lot of really good players in those guys that Chuck Daly had put together, and realized that, he didn't need me. And then when I went to Princeton, Coach Carril spent a lot more time with me and made me feel like they really wanted me to come.
Yeah.
And so I was excited about it. And it was just something that, but you were worried whether you'd be good enough to make the team. And when I got there, you realized how good everyone was.
Right.
And how this was not going to be a slam dunk by any means to make it from the freshman team to the varsity team. And it was very much touch and go there for quite a while.
Right. I mean, like you said, especially, when freshmen were not allowed to play on varsity and you're thinking about the spots and you want playing time, obviously, and you have to earn it. I mean, right. That's what it is in sports. You have to earn that. Everyone there is competing, but you had a strong work ethic, John, right? And you were able to actually work your way up to captain of the team your senior year. And you actually got to play a larger role as well on the court your junior year. So let's talk about, going from freshman year to obviously becoming a leader on the team, right, as a captain, and earning lots of playing time your junior year. Like, what went into that?
Well, it was again really a tough go there for a while. There was like 9 of us trying to make the varsity sophomore year. There was 4 spots on the team, and it was just, again, you just never knew. Coach Carril, after every practice, would go down the line and talk about each player. And so I had made the team. I was literally, I got the last spot on the team. I couldn't have been more thrilled. It was like a dream of a lifetime. If I had gotten cut, I'd already told my parents I'm leaving. I'm going to go back to Chicago, play Division III at the University of Chicago, and that's that. But anyway, make the team, and as part of telling you the truth, Coach Carril was going down the line one day and said, Johnny Rogers, you have no idea what you're doing. You're not a basketball player. You're legally blind. I can't teach you to see. And because you don't see anybody, nobody wants to play with you. But you play so hard. I'm going to keep you around for a few more days and see what happens. And, we were preseason top 20 that year in Sports Illustrated. So it was a really good group of players. The team who won the championship the year before and played Kentucky in the tournament. So it was really a great group and a great team to be a part of it. But it was just that honesty was very, very difficult. And you mentioned going from Hyde Park to Princeton. I tell people it's like going from, second grade math to advanced calculus.
Big difference.
It was such a big difference to play for
Right.
a genius coach who understood the game at a level that I had no idea existed until I got there.
And a Hall of Fame coach, right, at that. And, I know he recently passed, John, but I'm sure you have just so many special memories. I can only imagine so many special memories I'm sure you shared with him.
Well, it's all of any of us old Princeton guys, whenever we get together, and I had a bunch of old friends who we play in 3-on-3 tournaments around the country in the old, hoop it up tournaments. And we would spend the whole weekend telling Coach Carril stories. He transformed all of our lives with the things that he would say and things that he would do. And as he passed away this year, there were a lot of articles that talked about his uniqueness as a leader, just the fact that he would just say these things that sometimes were totally outrageous and inappropriate. And and back then he smoked a cigar on the court. So we would dribble around the ashes, and it was just a unique experience. I had a chance to get to know him a lot because when he would come to Chicago after I graduated, I would pick him up at the airport and we would go and visit high school gyms and go visit parents' homes and see kids in their homes. And, being his chauffeur was an experience of a lifetime, because he had all these stories to tell. I was always still learning something new from those experiences. He called me the Chicago connection. Until one year we recruited a player who lived in a big home, like a 4-car garage home. He always hated that. And when that player didn't do well, he said that, that Chicago connection is been interrupted. It's broken.
No more. Oh, I love that story. And again, may he rest in peace. And, going back to Princeton and some of these great stories that you're sharing with us, let's talk about the Tigers going 11-3 in Ivy League play and earning a share of the Ivy League title with Penn your senior year. That had to be special, right? Going from earning playing time to now an Ivy League title, John. I mean, every person's dream, right?
Well, it was a dream to be part of a championship team. And because junior year, we had not been champions. As I mentioned earlier, Penn not only won the Ivy League tournament, they went to the Final Four.
Right.
And many people don't realize that, there was an Ivy League team in the Final Four as recently as 1979. Mm-hmm. Ultimately they came up against Magic Johnson and Penn got destroyed in that Final Four game.
Right.
But, it was a really good fortune that I got a chance to be captain at the end of my junior year. You're right. I had a really good end of my junior year. I scored 20 points against Brown and 14 points against Yale. We won both games. And the writers asked Coach Carril, why hasn't Johnny Rogers been playing more all season? Why is, he not been out there? And we have it actually in the New Jersey newspaper. There's a quote from Coach Carril where he says, if Johnny Rogers could pass or dribble a little bit, he would have been playing a long time ago. So, I think so. He was surprised, I think, at how well I had done. And so I finished strong junior year and got to be captain senior year and got to start against some wonderful opportunities. Started against Michigan State the year after they'd won the championship. Got to start against Duke at Duke, Cameron Indoor Arena, and experience of a lifetime. But unfortunately, after the Duke game, Coach Carril came in the locker room and turned to me, and the first thing he said is, Johnny Rogers, it's not fair to have you on the court with players that good.
Oh.
And that was a team where, Duke was like number 2 in the country, and it was Mike Kaminsky and Gene Banks and, Jim Spanarkel and all these great players for that generation. Yeah. And so it was always a tough time with all the truth telling that he was constantly telling me. And the bottom line was, great players at Princeton have to have great vision. They've got to see plays developing before they're open to be able to throw those backdoor passes and the clever things that you see that Tosawa Nwoma was throwing this year for us. And that was my big weakness. I couldn't see. And he always said, you just can't teach vision. And it's something that's you either have it innately the way Larry Bird or Magic Johnson or, those great passers have. And if you don't have it, it's tough to play the Princeton offense.
Tough to play the Princeton offense. And again, like you said, just that tough love, that real love that he was consistently giving you. So we go from basketball and then we go to graduation, right? You finish at Princeton and then you got into immediately, right? You obviously after college, 2.5 years after graduation, you started working as a stockbroker at William Blair and Company. And as I understand it, John, you had known about stocks though earlier in life, right? From your parents actually introducing you to that at an early age, which I thought was pretty incredible. Because so often, John, so many of us, I think, especially in the African-American community, we don't learn about stocks till well after probably childhood. So it had to be special for you to kind of have that backing early and then be able to do it after college.
I was really, again, very fortunate. My father decided that after I was 12 years old, every birthday and every Christmas, I would get stocks instead of toys. And so he'd buy $250 of Commonwealth Edison, our local utility, or $250 of General Motors. My dad wasn't wealthy, but he wanted me to be exposed to the stock market. And he made me read the annual reports and the quarterly reports on the companies that he was investing in for me. And the good decision he made is he let me keep the dividend checks. So I would get a $10 check from General Motors or a $20 check from Commonwealth Edison, and I'd be so excited. He'd let me spend it on anything I wanted to. And I just sort of fell in love with the markets. And he had a broker on LaSalle Street, a guy named Stacy Adams, was the first African-American stockbroker on LaSalle Street. And I would just go and sit with Stacy and watch that old ticker tape go by, the Translux machine. And he would show me how to study the stocks and follow their movements and where to do research on companies. And Stacy was just this role model for me that grew out of my father's, exposing to me to the markets at such an early age.
Yeah. Like you said, being exposed to the markets at an early age. And then you go on to start the largest minority run mutual fund firm in the United States. I mean, just truly incredible, John. You go from getting these stocks as gifts, you're excited to get those dividend checks, and then you form something, which I think is truly magnificent. You do it in the hometown area, which I think is also great. So you found this back in 1983. So let's talk about that story and journey. Why was it so important for you to kind of, form your own company and be able to obviously give back in ways and do business in ways that you wanted to for yourself?
Well, there were a lot of things going on at that stage of my life that sort of gave me the the impetus to start Ariel Investments. I was 24 years old, and I just sort of thought, well, one thing that was really helpful was in Chicago at the time, we were seen as the Mecca for African American businesses.
Right.
Johnson Publishing was booming with Jet Magazine and Ebony Magazine.
Yeah, iconic magazines.
Exactly, just role models for all of us.
Yeah.
And you could read about successful, Black people in Ebony and Jet every week.
Right.
And then there was Johnson Products that created Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen hair care products. And they were the first publicly traded African-American owned company on the American Stock Exchange. And in his free time, George Johnson started Soul Train with Don Cornelius.
Yeah.
And, your listeners are too
remember the Soul Train line, John.
Remember, Soul Train line, and he started Independence Bank that became the largest Black bank in the country. So I had these role models who had started their companies at an early age in areas that they loved, and so I said maybe I can do this too and follow in their footsteps and these role models that were local. And I had an investment strategy and philosophy that I developed that I thought was pretty unique and creative at the time, of focusing on smaller and mid-sized companies that were undervalued, and use kind of a Warren Buffett lens of how to think about investing in those companies. And there were very few people doing that back in those days.
Right.
And then finally, feeling that since there had never been an African-American money management firm or mutual fund company, to compete with Fidelity or Vanguard or anyone else, maybe, we can make history by starting Ariel Investments. And interestingly, out your way, Eddie Brown was thinking the same thing, and he started Brown Capital Management 6 months after we did. And so we're both celebrating our 40th anniversary this year.
Amazing. Congratulations. As we talk about 40 years, which is not easy in business, and especially any company that was able to survive, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which obviously was so hard for so many. You started this back in 1983. You look where it is now. You're celebrating 40 years. John, what makes you most proud about the growth of your company?
Well, I think I'm proud of a couple of things. One, of course, we're proud of the long-term performance. You can't be successful in the money management and mutual fund business if you don't outperform the benchmarks and your peers. And so
Right.
we can show a 40-year track record of outperformance. Not each and every year. Of course, you have some bad years, you have some bad times.
Of
You
course.
disappoint people from time to time. But the long-term history, we're really proud of,
Yeah.
long-term performance history. And then I think we're really proud of the team that we've been able to attract. Some really dynamic, talented people. Can't
Yeah.
go through them all, but of course, Melody Hobson, who I met as a 17-year-old prospective Princeton student when
Wow.
I was volunteering to recruit minority students for Princeton,
Okay.
and I ended up meeting my most valuable player, Melody. She joined us as a summer intern, and then when she graduated from Princeton, she joined Ariel. And so
Yeah.
32 years later, she's the co-CEO of Ariel.
Yeah.
Just left her at the office. She's just continued to do extraordinary work. And, in
Wonderful.
her free time, she's the chairman of the board of Starbucks and on the board of JP Morgan Chase and doing all kinds of wonderful things as a
Amazing.
role model of a dynamic African-American woman and running a money management and mutual fund company. So the talent we've been able to attract and the talent that she's been able to attract, I think it's really something we're really proud of.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And obviously a name I think that so many of us know. And, just going back to kind of the diversity that you mentioned and the diversity pipeline, why is that so important for you, John, and to make sure that we continue to make sure that minorities get into this type of business, get into this type of field?
Well, one thing I always say, Reverend Jackson always talks about the fact that, baseball became a better sport once Jackie Robinson started to play, and
Right.
our own Ernie Banks here in Chicago, and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and all those great players. There have been great black players before Jackie Robinson. They just were never given the chance to play.
Right.
But once they got on the playing field, they excelled. They led their teams to the World Series. They made the Hall of Fame. They were great. So there's a lot of talented minority people minority leaders like Melody,
Right.
who maybe wouldn't have gotten a chance from some of the big majority companies, but they were gifted. They were extraordinarily talented. So I think that, you always want to make sure that you're searching for talent everywhere.
Right.
As we think about sports, if you're building a great team, if you can
Yeah.
recruit people, not only from your neighborhood, but you can recruit players from throughout the country or throughout the world,
Right.
the team gets better. We've seen that in the NBA. The NBA is stronger because of the diverse talent they've been able to attract from all over the world.
Right.
And so we think we're a firm that's uniquely positioned where we can attract women and people of color and people from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
And they can come and be comfortable at Ariel because they see people that look like them. It should be a competitive advantage for us as we make the decisions that we have to make day to day to make Ariel successful.
And as we talk about making Ariel successful, what's the future look like, John, for Ariel Investments as we begin to plan out, the next couple of years?
Well, we're in the process now of getting more and more diversified.
Okay.
About 12 years ago, we added an international and global team based in New York City, run by Rupal Bansali, who's a real leader and on the Barron's Roundtable and just done extraordinary work there. We just announced and starting right through now an emerging markets team that's joining us, and where the key person has a 35-year track record, and he's going to be joining our organization. And then last year, under Melody's leadership, we created what we call Project Black, a private equity fund aimed at building large Black businesses, businesses of scale. So as you look over the next few years, you just continue to see Ariel slowly but surely getting more diverse, building out outstanding teams in all the different areas that we have focused on. It's so exciting to go to New York now, and we've got, the emerging markets team and the Project Black team in one office. We have the global team in another office, and just this great group of talent that is added to the group that we have here in our hometown of Chicago.
In the hometown of Chicago. And I want to dive in on that, dig in on that a little bit deeper. Why was it so important for you to start this company in the hometown, of Chicago, investing back in your hometown community?
Well, I grew up here. My mom grew up here. My dad moved here when he was 12. Chicago was home.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, it was this place that had been a mecca for African-American businesses. We had a historic progressive Black mayor, Harold Washington, that got elected right around the time I was starting Ariel.
Yeah.
And it was just a place that you felt that was going to be open to, minorities trying to do something that maybe had never been done before.
Right.
You also had a community that fit with the values that Coach Carril taught at Princeton, where Coach Carril taught us you always think about your teammates first. Great things happen to you and the team when everyone's, rooting for each other, pulling for each other, helping each other, And so in Chicago, we had a history of the business community working with the civil rights community, working with the political community, working with the nonprofit community, everyone coming together to make Chicago a stronger place. And so I think I love that about Chicago, that I could come and feel like I was a part of the Chicago team, get involved with the Rainbow Push and the Urban League, become part of the African-American team, get involved with my alma mater, like Princeton and the University of Chicago Lab School, and be a part of those teams. So those are the things that were fun about Chicago. You could get involved, roll up your sleeves, and help make the institutions and the community stronger, those places that you cared about.
In those places that you cared about, all the great things that make Chicago so special and so great. I also have family there, John, so I felt everything you said about Chicago. And, staying with Chicago, you did something kind of cool with the guy that many of us know from Chicago for what he did with basketball in Chicago. Michael Jordan, of course, I'm talking about. I think you might be the first person I've ever spoke to that actually had a chance to beat him in a one-on-one game, John. I mean, that might be the coolest thing on the resume, right? I mean, how many people get to say they beat MJ in anything, but yet alone a one-on-one game? That had to be a great feeling for you as a kid from Chicago.
It was a great, great feeling. I've had a lot of, wonderful things happen in my life, but it was one of those that has lasted for a long, long time. People bring it up every day. And, and I think now because it's on, social media, and you can Google Michael Jordan and John Rogers, and under the things that Michael Jordan doesn't want you to see, or just Google our names, that it pops right up. But it was just it was a very fortunate moment that at his fantasy camp, he would play any camper to a short game. First one to win first person to make 3 baskets wins.
Right.
And he would do it one morning every year at the camp. And I think the year that I played him, I was probably the 15th player who had played him that day.
Right.
So I think he was tired.
No, we're not going to say that, John. You just beat him flat out.
Yeah, no. And then everybody, he had never lost before. So he was not only tired, but he was overconfident. And then, as I said earlier, Coach Carril said I was legally blind and, couldn't pass well. But he also said I was a good one-on-one player, because you don't have to pass when you play one-on-one.
Right. It's all you.
I was always good at making hard layups with either hand.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helped me with Michael. And then when the last shot goes in, you can hear him say, "Oh, no." And
does this really happen?
He was trying in the last shot. He just barely misses blocking it, which I'm just so happy he didn't block it.
Us all. Again, I know that had to just be a special feeling. No, don't say he was tired. You just beat him. MJ just had an off day, and it's good to hear his weakness. We finally found a MJ weakness, but it just goes back to your love of the basketball game. Then beyond that, I mean, you've done so much, John. You're a board member, McDonald's, Nike, the New York Times Company. You talked about being part of the board of trustees with the University of Chicago. So it sounds like just giving back is part of your DNA, right? Like just wanting to help, wanting to give back. What's kind of your mission with all these different boards you sit on and just all that you do in the community?
Well, I guess, I've been really, again, it's been great to be on these boards, and, just boards where I love the products. So I love McDonald's products. I love the things that Nike is doing. I love the New York Times. Work on Pat Ryan's company, Ryan Specialty. And I love the University of Chicago. So it's so much fun to be involved with an organization where you care about their values and feel like you have shared values. It makes it really special. But what I've really focused on when I'm in the boardroom, I of course bring my investment expertise and try to be helpful. I bring a lot of governance expertise. But what I've also really focused in on is the wealth gap in this country getting worse and worse between the African American community and the majority community.
Right.
And bringing data and information to these boardrooms and reminding them that not only do you want to have a diverse team in your organization, but you should be doing business with minority businesses, asking your majority suppliers to have diverse teams on the relationship with the company you're serving on or the institution you're serving on, and creating equal economic opportunity for all walks of life, people coming from all different backgrounds, Black, brown, whatever it happens to be. Because sometimes people just get comfortable doing business with people that look like them, that they've always done business with.
Right.
And I'll remind them, if they care about diversity and inclusion, they've got to create economic opportunity for everyone. And I sort of push and nudge on that, and push really hard, and get companies to use the term business diversity instead of supplier diversity, to show they're open to work with people in everything they do.
Right.
And then try to get the anchor institutions in our communities to work with minority businesses, whether it's a university or a hospital, or whether it's a corporation or the government.
Yeah, I like that. You talked about, the wealth gap, as you said, which unfortunately is continuing to widen. We've seen what inflation has done to so many, in this country. So, as I touch on that, just on what can be done, so we can, help to begin at least to put a dent in that wealth gap that currently exists, and, make sure, especially that Black folks in this country, are able to get a piece, I'd say probably of the American pie.
Well, we've tried to do a couple of things at Ariel to just not, as a friend says, admire the problem, but to have some specific things that we do.
Right.
So one thing I already mentioned already of, talking about changing the language we use to use business diversity instead of supplier diversity. I also tell people all the time, we need access to capital as entrepreneurs. I needed that when I started, but access to customers is just as important. So reminding all the anchor institutions in our community to work with minority businesses, I think, is a part of the answer.
Right.
The other things we've done at Ariel, we started 25 years ago when Arnie Duncan, former Secretary of Education, was working at Ariel. He created the Ariel Community Academy along with his sister. It's a small public school where we teach kids about the stock market. And we give the kids real money to invest in real stocks to sort of, emulate what my dad did for me. And getting kids to understand not only the importance of saving and investing and learning about how to do research on companies, but they're also learning and thinking about financial services careers for the first time.
Right.
And we think that's important. We have a program at the University of Chicago for minority students to get paid internships to work in the investment offices of major endowments throughout the country.
Okay.
Again, another great place to learn about the investment world and get exposed to investment careers.
Right.
And then the final one that was really important is about 20 years ago with Russell Reynolds, we created a program for African Americans that are on corporate boards.
Okay.
And the idea was that we should come together and know each other, learn how to be leaders in the boardroom, but how to also to lead around economic justice issues once we're in the boardroom. Feeling that often we get in these leadership roles and we get too shy about talking about these uncomfortable issues.
Right.
But if we don't speak up and speak out, nothing's going to change.
Right.
So over the years, we've brought in leaders like Congressman John Lewis to remind us that we have to make good trouble in the boardroom.
Yes.
We've had Reverend Jackson. We've had Reverend Sharpton. We've had former Ambassador Andy Young, who's been the mayor of Atlanta also.
Right.
Harry Belafonte was Dr. King's best friend. Spike Lee. People who have been willing to speak up and speak out for fairness to help be a role model for all of us that have been in those boardrooms. And it's just been great. And, President Obama came and spoke one year. Valerie Jarrett has spoken there. We've had Elon Musk to Jamie Dimon there. But the idea is to empower African Americans and now Latino directors to make a difference for our communities once we're in these leadership roles.
Wonderful to hear just all the great work that's being done. Again, an investment work that you're doing to make a change and a difference. Now, I got a question for you, Mr. Rogers. The question is, did you ever meet or work with Reginald Lewis, the billionaires from Baltimore with Patrice International Corporation?
I did read his book, Why Do White Guys Have All the Fun?
Yeah.
I might have met him once. I've gotten to know his daughter quite well and his widow. Yeah. And actually, I'm supposed to see Loida speak here in Chicago. I think it's next week.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So his legacy is still alive, and the work that his family has done to keep that legacy moving forward has been really important. Yeah. So Reggie Lewis was somebody who made a difference for all of us.
Well said. And talking about next week, John, you just made me think WNBA draft is next week. Something cool that you have also on the resume as an owner of the Chicago Sky. And I wanted to touch in on that and kind of just your investment with women's basketball and where kind of that be getting started.
It's been really an adventure. It started actually when I was at Princeton. I lived across the hall from 4 women players.
Okay.
So early on, I got to learn the importance of women's basketball, and I'd go and watch them practice and go see their games, and
Yeah.
it was fun. Some of my best friends again were folks from the women's team, and then as the years went on, we started not only having men interns from the men's team, we started having women interns from the women's team at Princeton. And I mentioned our 3-on-3 team that the guys played on. We eventually got a group of women players, primarily former Princeton players, and we sponsored their playing in tournaments all over the country also. And that was really kind of fun. So women's basketball has just been really important to me. And it's so exciting to see how popular things were in the ratings this year.
9.9 million, John. Amazing. Broke record.
No, it's so great. It's just so fantastic. And I got involved with Chicago Sky when they first opened up here in Chicago. Became the number 2 owner behind Michael Alter over time. And it was obviously a thrill to win the World Championship 2 years ago and get a ring. And
sorry about Candace Parker, John.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough year this year for us. But I think eventually Coach Wade will get us back on the winning track. And we have a new woman, Nadia Rollinson, who's our kind of new CEO of it's a dynamic Black woman who's going to help us keep this legacy of winning, or keeping this recent legacy of winning in place going forward, and build a great model franchise here in Chicago.
Which is amazing. Again, obviously love watching WNBA, Chicago Sky games. And, just going back to the women's tournament that we all just saw, I mean, it kept us busy on a Sunday afternoon. Now the conversation, though, John, has kind of shifted. How do we get that excitement that happened there over to the WNBA? I just want to know if you have any, just curious, as we saw, we broke so many records. I mean, more than an MLS game. I mean, this beat out so many records, so many other leagues. But how do we get that excitement and generate it now over to the WNBA season, which will be here before you know it?
I know we just all have to work together to tell people, word of mouth is so critical. This time, all my friends were talking about this last tournament. And I know social media blew up and everyone wanted to watch those last few games.
Yeah.
So we've got to just keep telling everyone, but also we have to, really push the major corporations in this country that say they care about diversity and inclusion, and they have their, sky suites, sky boxes for the Bears and the Bulls and et cetera. Around the country, they have the season tickets all bought, at very expensive prices for all these other sports. But then when it comes to spending money on WNBA teams, often these enlightened companies are not doing their part. They should be doing it because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's outstanding basketball. Yeah. And if you get people exposed to it, people want to come back and enjoy it. And I know when I bring my friends, they all want to come back. That's always the big thing. So I think we've got to push the corporate America to do their part in buying season tickets, being sponsors, and then there'll be more resources to get the word out. To be able to publicize the great things that are happening in the WNBA and getting more and more of the media to cover it the way it really deserves to be covered.
There you go. Start investing in women's sports, folks. And it starts with our corporations, as you said. And I think as you just adequately said, then the media attention will continue to follow. And I'm hoping some of this media attention that came from the tournament also follows over, obviously, to the WNBA. And you talked about the 3-on-3 tournament, and you happen to also be one of the driving forces behind the rise of 3-on-3 basketball in the U.S. We saw the Olympic debut of it, which I thought was a lot of fun, John. I think that had to be fun for you to kind of see it come to fruition.
Well, it was a little bit of, really, it was very, very much of a heartbreak, that the men's team didn't make it to the Olympics. It was great that the women's team made it to the Olympics and won the championship in 3-on-3 basketball. We were one game short. We had to win one more game in a tournament over in Europe, and the men would have made the tournament also. This is sort of, it's been fun though, because we started, playing, as I mentioned, all over the country in 3-on-3. Who put up tournaments, and it was a lot of former Princeton players, and Arnie Duncan again played with us, but Craig Robinson, who was a superstar at Princeton and is Michelle Obama's brother, he was probably at one time the best 3-on-3 player in the country. He could shoot and pass, and he'd gotten drafted by the 76ers. He had been the 4th leading scorer in Princeton's history. He was a great 3-on-3 player. And as the years went on and we got older and older, we replaced ourselves with younger, primarily Princeton guys or people who trained in the Princeton system at Brown or Northwestern or wherever. And we kept the sort of journey alive. And I became more sponsor and coach and no longer player. And then when it started to look like a possibility of a Olympic team, we really worked extra hard to put the best guys together who understand, Princeton basketball and Princeton offense, and had a couple of former Princeton great players come and help coach us. Armand Hill, who had been a first-round pick of the Hawks and coached with Doc Rivers forever, in the NBA, and then Sidney Johnson, who had been head coach at Fairfield after Princeton.
Right.
Those guys came out and started helping to coach us, and we're hoping Kareem Maddox is now probably arguably the best American 3-on-3 player in the country, and he played at Princeton a number of years, and we've got our fingers crossed that we're going to be ready for the Olympics next year.
Fingers
with
crossed.
Kareem on the team.
Coming up very soon. Great things come from Princeton, by the way. Love all the names that you mentioned. John, do you still get on the basketball court now? Do you still get some shots up?
Every once in a while I get a few shots up, but it's I really can't. You can't run and jump, unfortunately.
Things change as we get older, but good to see you're still active with basketball. John, it's been such a pleasure and delight to have you on, speak with you, get to know you, learn about your company, and just all the great things that you're continuing to do in the community. I mean, your resume is just on and on and on, folks. He's also co-chair at the 2009 Presidential Inaugural Committee, as well as sitting on the board of directors for the Barack Obama Foundation. So, I mean, you seem like you've done it all, John. So what's next in the John Rogers story?
It's been very lucky. I'm just going to continue to work toward excellence with performance at Ariel, making sure that we are doing our best to outperform our indexes and our peer groups as stock pickers.
Yeah.
We want our Ariel Mutual Fund family to be in everyone's 401k plan, and we wanted to, people who have kids, we want them to come to the Illinois 529 program and find our funds. And so we're out there just trying to build our brand. We're the little guys, David versus Goliath. And Melanie and I want to build a really major mutual fund brand and money management brand that can compete with the big guys. And so that's what we're focused on. 40 years in, we're working harder than ever and think there's more opportunity than ever. And that's where our focus is. We're competitors and committed to winning to the best of our ability.
I love that. Committed to winning to the best of our abilities. Now, before I let you go, you said something that I keep hearing a lot of chatter about, these retirement plans. I know a lot of people are anxious, John, nervous as it gets to it. We're always hearing these things about retirement plans, if there will be enough money. So before I let you go, I have to ask you, what's the best thing that, people can do now, whether young or old? What's the best way to begin to think about saving for retirement? How does Ariel Investments play a part in that? Because I think that's such important information to so many out there.
Well, thank you for asking. I mean, I touched on it from an Ariel standpoint. We have mutual funds for individual investors, whether it's domestic equity funds or international and global, or, we have diversified products that individuals can invest in and get exposed to the stock market. And over time, I believe that having money invested in the stock market for the long run is the best place to put money. It's stock market compounds over time, and people like Warren Buffett have talked often about how much money can be built in investing in equities, and mutual funds are the best way to do it, where you get a diversified group of investments under one roof, and you can get over time really good performance. The other thing is that if you like to pick stocks yourself, pick within your circle of competence. Invest in areas that you know well and care about. So, like you, I love sports, love basketball. Our biggest holding right now in Ariel Fund is Madison Square Garden Entertainment, that owns Madison Square Garden,
right?
And it owns the regional sports net that telecasts the Knicks and the Rangers.
Right.
It's been a really interesting investment. I had a chance to meet with Jim Dolan recently and talk about the future of the Knicks and the future of the Garden and what's happening with the new arena they're building in Las Vegas called the Sphere. And it's fun to invest in things you kind of know something about, and and then you can hopefully do well when you stick to names and companies and industries that you know well.
All right, one last question for you before I let you go, John. The question's from Mike Patton. He said, you put some in aggressive, steady, and moderate areas. Correct, Mr. Rogers?
Yes, we try to invest in companies that we can own for the long run. Our logo is a turtle, and we believe in that old Aesop's fable that slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
And the kind of companies we invest in are ones that, you feel pretty confident they're going to be around 30 years from now. We think Madison Square Garden will be around 30 years from now. The Knicks and the Rangers will still be playing. And but we have other mundane companies like Mohawk that makes carpeting. Well, we think people are going to need carpets for the next 30 years also. So we want those kind of nice, steady businesses where hopefully they'll be around for the long run. Unlike some of the hot tech stocks that somebody comes out with a better mousetrap tomorrow and disrupt the industry. We try to stay away from those kind of volatile stocks where you can have a big home run or have a big failure. And those are hard for us to do at Ariel.
That is so great to hear. Well, John, just truly appreciate your time. Thanks so much for answering the questions. Anywhere where people can find out more. They're probably hearing all this great stuff you're sharing. Can you give the website where people can access more?
It's arielinvestments.com. And we've just recently rebranded. You wouldn't be surprised to see it's orange and black. So it's the old Princeton colors. So.
See, I knew it was something with that, but I like the orange and black. All right. Thank you so much, John, for your time. I will let you get back to all the great things that you continue to do. And again, thank you so much for taking time out to talk with me and my listeners. Truly appreciate it. Have a great one, John.
Thank you for including me. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. All right, you guys just heard from John Rogers. Be sure to check out Ariel Investments. He gives some great information about retirement, and we're all going to want to retire, right? Eventually, so make sure you check out Ariel Investments. He's doing great stuff with the WNBA, investing in women. We should always be investing in women's sports, and I truly appreciate all of you investing time in today's show. We'll be back next week for the live stream show on Thursday as we're joined by special guest Chris Baker, a former NFL defensive lineman and a name that many of you all in Washington should know very, very well. That'll be at 6 p.m. again next Thursday. Also have some great audio shows coming out. My next guest, Rob Knox. You won't want to miss that. That will drop next week on the audio show. So make sure you're also subscribed to this podcast anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. And as always, a special thanks to my team and all of you all for listening. I could not do it without you all. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the sports world, smile, and please don't take your fantasy sports too seriously because there's always another play. Bye, guys. Have a great one.
Follow Kelsey on social media at The Real K Nelson. Catch episodes of Listen In with KNN on YouTube, on air at AM 1340 and 96.9 FM, Fox Sports Radio, on Facebook and Twitter, and online at KelseyNicoleNelson.com. Thank you for watching this live stream broadcast of Listen In with KNN.
Listen In with KNN on Fox Sports Radio now offers official Kelsey Nicole Nelson apparel in a variety of styles for men and women. Fashionable shirts, leggings, hats, jackets, and more. Order now and get 15% off and free shipping. Just enter promo code KNN. Get your Listen In with KNN wearables today. And check out Listen In with KNN on Fox Sports Radio with Kelsey Nicole Nelson.